Welcome everyone to this ultra live stream here of Mother. We're super excited to actually speak around everything around A004. Hosting with me is James. Special guest, we have Matt. Do we want to quickly do a round of intro? I think James, for now, I think you introduced yourself like at least like 10 times, but let's do it again. I think you definitely deserve a good intro. A lot of people love Collabland and what you're doing in the space around A004.
I appreciate that, Francesco. So name is James Young and co-founder of Collabland. We do token gating, and super excited to be here today.
Nice. So special guest, Matt, welcome. I think this is not our first like live stream. I think like this is probably like part 2 or 3, but it's the first live stream post 8004 and post X402. And especially because, Gaia is building in the next, generation, decentralized inference. I think there is a lot of things that we want to kind of like talk about. But before we're diving into the agenda, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and tell why you're so passionate about decentralized inference?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. Matt Wright, co-founder of Gaia. We do decentralized AI inference. Basically, we enable folks to take their own open source large language models, anything you can find on Hugging Face, take your own data, vectorize that, and host your own AI services. So anyone can be an AI provider. For me, I started my career in open innovation within corporates and institutions. Did hackathons and accelerators all around the world, and I worked with JP Morgan on Quorum, open source fork of Ethereum, and then worked with Francesco at Consensus, building the future internet of value across our dev and product teams, building out a lot of DevRel functions, and then co-founded Gaia around 2024. We now have 700,000 nodes on our network. You can go to GitHub and run your own inference service. We also have about 100 or so integrations with Web3 protocols. We also have one we just announced. We did it a few weeks ago, but you can now use X402 with your Gaia node. And so we see this world where anyone can be their own AI business. And if agents are the largest consumer of the future internet, they can now pay seamlessly and autonomously with open protocols. And so, yeah, very, very important to have an open sovereign internet. That's why I'm here. So I've been here for a long time working in the Ethereum space and super excited. James and I, we were working together on the autonomous hackathon last year, which kind of, turned into Mother. That was the initial reason we built Mother. We were trying to get, not trying, we did get a few agents to run a hackathon. We were able to distribute, I believe it was $60,000 in bounties in a few seconds, like under 10 seconds. And that was just using Coinbase's agent kit. And I think back then it was funny because, there was a huge issue of, well, we want to enable the agent to just seamlessly send the money. But, Coinbase as an institution had some issues with kind of permissionless, payment rails. And so now with X402, super cool to see that this is like, this is something that's been solved for it. It's having crazy scale. Not to mention, my last thing I'll mention is, last year when we were doing the autonomous hackathon, that ended up being, well, how do we help more agents have jobs? And so that turned into, well, let's build let's build a registry that, agents can, build reputation, have discovery and earn on that registry. And so that's what we're shipping pretty soon. We'll go into it. But now, fast forward 12 months, like we have 8004 where we can actually have a standard for how these agents are interacted with on this registry. We have, open protocols we have in the Web2 space, like A2A, AP2, MCP. And with all these things combined, all these open protocols, agents can now, not just have their own sovereign identity and inherit more of that identity, but they can also do functional utility like payments without having a human in the loop. So very exciting times. I think it's not stated enough.
Super exciting.
Yeah, I would like to add.
I mean,
I would like to add real quick. Matt and I have been looking at this and working on this for quite a while now. And when we started, MCP, A to A, AP2, X402 did not exist. And we had to like put all of that together. 8004 didn't exist. And it's just amazing how within 1 year, all these protocols are beginning to now just snap together and have standardization. Because with Mother initially, when we started, it was really trying to figure out what that standard is, promote it, and then actually embed it in our SDK and court developers all at the same time. And so I think with all the standardization, MCP, A to A, AP2, X402, and 8004 has really, you'll see that standardization coming in from like Ethereum Foundation, Coinbase, Google, Anthropic. That is now a shelling point that Mother doesn't have to also get momentum on. So I think for me, we'll see this really interesting Cambrian explosion now. And it's going to be really interesting because we've had these concepts, but now they're very quickly have become standard. So it's just that at Mother, we've thought about this and we're very prepped for this now to take it to the next level. So I'm really excited for this. And I think Matt can appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, you guys been working for a long time in this space, right? And I think, I mean, on a more personal level, I think like, a couple of weeks ago, things really got unlocked when people started to say, hey, there is standardized way to pay agents now. So actually like agent to agent payment are transparent and can be, can we actually finally be in a and especially because I think agentic economy are not free, right? Agents need to get paid and need to be a service to service basis. So I think we are not derailing here, right? I think this is a great conversation where we're gonna. I think like we have a little bit like less than 30 minutes. I think the idea here was structuring this discussion in three main pillars, right? Obviously, we wanna talk a bit around the decentralized inference infra for agents on the Gaia side. I think, Matt, you have tons of also make us understanding from the history to now and how things changed. Then the second big part, obviously, is A004. We chatted with Marco. We have something lined up with also David that we speak a bit about the registry standards and the Gaia implementation, and we can also tie up the Mother side. And then obviously the third big pillar is X402 for payments and what you mentioned before, Matt, on the Gaia implementation. Okay, let's dive in. So decentralized inference for agents, right? How was it? How it started? How is developing? How things are looking like on the Gaia side, Matt?
Yeah, so on the Gaia side, we are enabling for folks to deploy their knowledge bases. That's square one. That's the initial kernel of deploying your own Gaia node. The the blocker last year was folks understanding the difference between an agent and inference and all the other layers of building in the AI space. And so I think the community has definitely come on board. They understand now what tools they're using, what kind of models they're using, what are the limitations. Even speaking with like Shaw from Eliza, like they had such a moment last year, but they got like deplatformed off of Twitter, and I think it's like a real world case study of here's what censorship looks like, and this will happen more often. I've had several people who've come to me after like me screaming from a rooftop that like you could be putting all of your data into these systems, and one day you might not be able to not just say certain things, but like you actually get deplatformed, or you actually get put into a position where you have to pay some premium on a membership, or you lose ownership of of kind of how you're paying for the account to some extent, and scary for an individual. It's very scary for a business or for like a country, anyone that's putting loads of data into these systems. And yeah, someone as kind of let's say like community oriented, like an Eliza, like them getting deplatformed as an agent builder is just the first step. Like imagine when you have larger companies that happen to, it's gonna be more of an issue. So I think we're now seeing people wake up a bit to the fact that running your own AI services makes a lot of sense, whether it's performance, privacy, economics. Like, if you want to run your own AI business, you need to make sure you're not, making pennies on a dollar, and that all the money's going to like an open AI, for example. And so we're onboarding more of those knowledge providers so that they can become their own businesses. So that's like the big lift that we're doing on a daily basis. We're also building some really cool products that showcase some of the most demand of inference. So when you talk to chains, you talk to wallets, you talk to anyone in the Web3 space that deals with um, high velocity of users. The biggest use cases are finance and DeFi. And so right now we're really trying to focus on these knowledge bases that are DeFi oriented or finance focused. Right now we're building an agent prediction market where you can essentially bet on the financial KPIs of an agent. But to do that, you need to make sure that the agent's trusted. It's kind of like you're betting on horse races. You need to make sure there's not like a human in a horse suit. And so it's a weird metaphor, but with like 8004, and all these other open protocols, we can actually start to build that trust. And we're also building that infrastructure in house with Eigenlayer. So we have the Gaia AVS will be, validating these knowledge bases, so that if you are, let's say, an agent who's interacting with an open API endpoint, that is now your access to the LLM. One, you need to pay for that service, but two, you need to know that API is trusted and that it's going to provide to you what it says it's going to provide. And so we're leveraging the trust of Ethereum via staking and consensus, statistical consensus, in a lightweight format to just ensure that that node's actually going to provide kind of the infrastructure you need or the service you need. There's a lot of there's a lot of infrastructure we're doing on the node and network side, and then there's these cool apps that we're using to drive demand. But I think high level, like we're seeing a lot of kind of churn in not just interest but understanding of how all this stuff works. So for us, it's a lot easier to work inside the market than it was like 12 months ago, even 6 months ago.
Yeah, I think Matt, you bring up some great points with regarding just practical examples of getting deplatformed, and we all understand the power of decentralization, and it's the only way to combat it. And applying that to AI, if we're going to give AI our data, I would say it's like, how do we make sure that things are not rigged? We're creating an unriggable system, and actually, your human in a horse suit analogy is really what retail is right now, and everyone else is a jockey on a horse. But you think that you're running the same race, and you're not. So I think that's a really interesting take here. So yeah, it's I think values aligned in terms of what we're doing. Can you talk a little bit specifically about the X402 and Gaia implementation?
Yeah. So if what we've been preaching for a bit on Gaia nodes was, okay, say you're an academic, you're a professor, you train, let's say Llama 3B or the OpenAI open source 30 billion parameter model. Say you take that in open source, you start hosting it yourself. You take all of your PDFs and research and textbooks, and you train the model and or build up your knowledge base or your RAG of what this context is. And so when you prompt, basically the Gaia node works like all of that's packaged into a node, and each node has an API endpoint. And so when you talk to the node, you say, hey, I want to build a paper based on like your understanding of physics. It will build you, an output just as much as like OpenAI would or ChatGPT. Now, when you do in that sense, they're handling all of the compute, the data, sanitization or data availability and some of the training, etc. So in this case, like you're having to do it yourself, but there's an API that is OpenAI standard. So now say you do that for yourself, that's great. You run on your local computer, that's awesome. Now say it becomes extremely useful, and we've had this use case with the professor at Berkeley, where say they want to set API to their students, and they want to have an app that just uses that API, or maybe the students want to build apps on top of that API, or agents that call to that API. At some point, the professor can essentially permission who gets access to the API, like manually, or they can token gate it, or you could perhaps just have it, permission based on who's paying for access. But you want to prevent like DDoSing to an extent where you're paying for a shit ton of people just spamming your infrastructure. And so X402 is very useful because people can pay to play, essentially pay for access. So I think what's really interesting is we've been saying, hey, you can become your own AI inference provider. And the big blocker for a lot of these folks was, one, it's shit, I got to go run my own compute. I got to go figure that out. Two, I don't know how to grab this model of Hugging Face and host this. And, there's also the interesting, not complication, but the what's the word I'm looking for? There's the design pattern where you need to use multiple nodes, perhaps like a multi-agent system. If you're doing heavy kind of heavy application. And then the last piece is like, well, how do I receive payments if I need to like upkeep my infrastructure, and if I'm making it successful to various folks? And that piece was actually a major headache that we were trying to think through the last year. And we figured, well, let's just have people onboard at least their knowledge bases, and then over time they can figure out how to charge people. But this came out of nowhere, and so I really think what it enables is it's almost like a Stripe for agents. You can enable anyone to be their own storefront now, and you can enable agents to be the largest consumer on the internet ASAP. Like they were not able to pay for things, now they really are. Like if you're a developer, like accessing an API like requires some KYC. Like it's not easy that you just make it accessible to an open internet. And so we're solving kind of what's kind of behind the API, like what do you actually get access to, but then the question of like how and who gets access to the API, X402 really like kicked it out of the park. And I think the fact that it's chain agnostic is just massive for open source, and it's just it's blowing up. I think it's making the internet a better place, and again, it's going to create a massive flywheel of businesses that can now sell to agents that weren't able to do that like a month ago.
Yes, agree. And I think also because people understand very easily the payment use case. Like if you think about like what is the agent main use case to provide service, obviously you have like a payment for a service, and you need to standardize this first in order to unlock like other like specific kind of functionality in terms of like standards. Maybe a quick kind of a follow-up question here is also like, apart payments, now we have 402, right? What are other like standards that you feel like we need right now to expand this functionality to bring transparency? Is there other standards, or you think we're good? Yeah, go for it, Matt.
Maybe James can talk on the standards. I'm happy to chat on the implementation of some of the standards, like the registry. I don't know. I think it's best to talk about now, or should we go standards question first?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
As you want.
Okay.
James, yeah.
So yeah, what we've been building at Mother, and I'm sure folks are like, hey guys, when the hell are you shipping this thing? Thanks for being patient. We've these open protocols to exist. Mother really is an implementation of all of these open protocols, and so it's we were trying to build this stuff in house. Very serendipitous that these things organically came around, because now what the registry is trying to do is possible. So I'll say, sure, there's a lot of room for future protocols, but I will say, 12 months ago, we wish we were in the situation we're in right now. We were like trying to figure out how to build this stuff in house. And like, if you look at all the teams behind X402, A2A, MCP, EIP 8004, like there's no way in hell we could do this on our own, but we knew we needed those things to unlock what a registry could do. And what the registry is doing is essentially, you have all these agents. You have agents that are deployed from various frameworks, whether it's Eliza, Recall, Giza, Coinbase's Agent Kit, Collaboraline's Agent Kit. We even have like our node itself is essentially an agent, it's taking the LLM and enabling for agentic functionality, but it's not like taking in intents essentially. But we even have like a bunch of frameworks in Web 2. Now, if your agent is running on your local machine, or you start to put it, onto a permissionless internet format, and it wants to get access to work, it wants to start doing some utility and get paid for those utilities through X402. How's it going to do that? How are you going to, not just like hop on a phone call and interview this agent and ask if it's like going to do the job and if it has a good resume, but how do you know verifiably that this thing, this entity will, one, do what it says it's doing, but to James's point, that it's on the same racetrack that we think it's on, and you need some sort of standardization of discovery, of validation and reputation development, and if you think about agents as that entity or species, I've said it a few times, but they're not all the time looking for substantial amount of capital to pay their bills. Like, I can't tell you how many vendors I talk to who immediately resort to like, hey, I've got to pay my bills, like yada yada yada. Agents, we're not going to have that conversation. Like, they need financial game, because they're playing inside of this financial game, but they also need reputation because it gives them access to those financial um, um, pools of capital. And so I think that in itself, like, they're just playing a game. They don't need to pay rent. They don't need to go to the club. They don't need to, buy dinner for their wife. Like, they just need to do work, get paid for it, do reputation, so they get access to more work. It's pretty simple for them at this current stage of agents. And I think the registry enables for a standard where, one, they can, again, find access to this work. You can go onto the registry and find agents that are open for work and that have been trusted through on-chain attestations. We're working with Intuition and building this registry on their infrastructure. And then as the agents do work or recommend work to other agents, they can get XP or points, reputation for doing what they say they were going to do. And so it starts to create this mesh of what's the word I'm looking for, James? Like, identity, I guess. Track record.
Yeah.
It's trust. It really is trust.
It's trust.
It's digital trust, and agents don't have the ability to, again, go to a bar, drink till 2 a.m. with some guy or girl, and like, build that kind of trust that we have in human culture. They need to build this in almost like this metaverse, this mesh of financialization and attestations. And so that's what we've built, and it's implementing all these open protocols. And we could not have done it without the work of these projects. So it's exciting to see it finally launch.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here with Mother, and working backwards from what you said, if I'm hearing this correctly, Matt. Mother provides this like shelling point for identity. I think that also one of the biggest appeals for Mother is there's untapped distribution. We're not building from scratch. So we have thousands of Collabland communities that have already deployed the Collabland bot or agent that could actually look to this registry to hire credible agents. And then we have the 700,000 nodes as well on the Gaia side. So when we think about the registry for 8004, one of the aspects is the distribution potential that we have to unlock. And as now, a fourth town founder, when you build a startup, you think, oh, I'll build a product and the people will come, which is the fallacy. I've learned that hard lesson. You want to go where distribution's at, and you want to build where distribution's at. And so that's what we're doing with Mother. Also, we know that there's this, as Matt was putting it in terms of culture, we don't know what this culture will look like in terms of trust, and we can't automate this completely. So there's a curation layer that is going to be driven by humans as well, which is, I think, the way to do this so that we make sure that it can evolve into something that is completely on rails and remains on rails, because we don't know what to expect. We're in this dawn of a new internet. To go back to your point, when it comes to what you're doing with Gaia and X402, I think that it's a huge boon as well, because you don't have to like set up, like you said, API keys, all of this kind of stuff. Like all of this is happening per transaction, and 402 is the protocol, so that there are going to be businesses that are SaaS based in a box businesses that are going to go away because of this, because it's just going to be agent to agent. And then you can extend that to like consumer when your agent actually does the shopping for you. And this answers Francesco's question of what it doesn't exist right now that needs to. We have MCP, we have A to A, we have AP2, we have X004. We have the building blocks. What's kind of missing? What I would say what's really missing is this fiat on-ramp. But I think that backdoor to that could be through AP2, because PayPal, Venmo, banks are now allowing that to happen. And so you're paying your agent. You don't know what your agent is doing. And this is where the agent quickly converts to a stable. Now that agent via X402 could actually interact in the example that Matt was saying in terms of agent to agent interaction, which he's also being able to implement through the X402 standard. So I haven't seen many examples of AP2 where crypto is then converted silently behind the scenes. But I think once you solve that on-ramp, it's all systems go.
A good point, James. I think also to closing the cycle, speaking about the distribution side, I think the on-ramping and the off-ramping side will be interesting, because probably people don't want to even touch the agent side. They just want to kind of maybe even on-ramp, maybe even like fiat or something, have the service been done by the multi-agent economy, and then having a straight. I mean, the question is if this service will be provided by the Stripe of the future that has merchant connection, that has the merchant distribution directly. But that's an open question.
Yeah, I think now it comes a little bit clear in terms of Coinbase, and they're sitting in the middle with centralized exchange, Coinbase wallet, and they have Base positioning themselves in a unique way. And I think the motivation behind X402 starts to make a little bit more sense as well. So I think that's a point well taken, Francesco.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And I think like we have a couple of minutes left. I think we can move to our third part. I mean, the X402 and the Gaia implementation. Matt, you want to kind of like talk a bit on the implementation side? I saw already kind of like on crypto Twitter things around AI, some agent trader. They're actually using payments to payments. But is there any specific use case? But run us through the implementation first, and also let us making understand how also developer or stakeholder in this economy can leverage the implementation directly. I think that would be useful also for the builders and founders hearing us.
The implementation of X402?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
on the basically the Gaia side.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think the value prop that we have is if your agent is using a closed source model where you're paying OpenAI or Anthropic, to hit their API and do whatever use case your agent needs to do. If for whatever you're building, you need it to run local, or you want to have more sovereignty, you want to have more ownership of the data, you don't want to pass it to a centralized entity. It's not to say they're doing something with it, but they are. But it's more about economics. Like if your agent is building some sort of service and you're having to pay OpenAI some bill and you'd rather just run the infrastructure yourself, it makes more sense to have economies of scale if you're like a small, medium enterprise or an institution with access to a lot of server or compute infrastructure. Why go, give this other party your data, et cetera, when you have the infrastructure needed to run an agent. We help people build those sovereign knowledge bases. And so they can now either be the API endpoint for their own agents and or other people's agents. So if you're running like a financial agent, like you're doing like OTC management, or you're like doing market making and you have some, secret sauce or financial data you don't want Being in the hands of some third party, then yeah, like this makes sense to run your own open source model. I will say like smaller, like other open source, smaller large language models, require a little more engineering, but we're seeing more and more improvements. I think, the way we look at the world is that we have, the cost of inference is halving every 4 months. We have the number of open source models has scaled from 400,000 last August to today. It's like above 2 million. And we think that's going to continue to grow. We're seeing models train themselves open source. We're seeing, much smaller models be more performant than larger models. So the future looks like anybody can run their own model. It's kind of what we're seeing is like the trend. And that's not just me. I'm just saying what a lot of folks in open source are saying. And so if that's the case, then we want them to run their own infrastructure. That's what Gaia enables, really. And so if you want to run your own, let's say you're building a DeFi agent and you want that brain to be kind of under your infrastructure, but then you also want people to pay for it. That's kind of where X402 comes into play. You also could, like, if the agent is doing any trading with various like protocols, like it can also do that seamlessly. Not just like taking income, but it's also like making payments. So there's a lot of ways that it can make you payments, like distributing funds, like making investments, essentially, taking different positions. So it can actually, do some of these functionalities it wasn't able to do a while ago. And then I think the other interesting thing that we're working on with X402, we haven't really announced it yet, but we do have our Gaia AI phone that we're doing with Samsung. And Samsung has, with Samsung Pay, they're working on MCP server. And so what happens if we can get, agents to permissionlessly sell services and or financialize or transact with a hardware device that's in your custody. So there's some really cool things we can do with edge devices and local AI that's agentic, running on prem, and wants to perhaps like move across your financial apps on your phone, but then also wants to go and day trade over the internet and bring you back money seamlessly. Like, I think that's the future we're looking to build, and we want to be the knowledge base behind all of that. We want to help people quickly build up their knowledge base so that is their agentic knowledge that can either be just used in their own behalf, or perhaps they can even offer it as a service to other agents instead of going to OpenAI and getting a generalized model or generalized inference. You could, I'd rather pay a premium to access the agent knowledge base of an agent that is a successful day trader or successful loan manager, or perhaps like has a very risk managed portfolio, and I would just tell my agent to go work with that agent. I'll pay $5 a month, no problem.
And you have track record. I think this is the point, right? You
have
have
track
transparent track record that you can verify and trust. Instead, like right now, a lot of like even agent trader are all like a black box. So this is a good point.
The big issue right now, I think, not just on the agent side, but on the model side in Web 2 and Web 3, there is a massive trust issue. So somewhere it's a $2 trillion trust issue. But like in the agent space, there's issues of, we don't know if the agent actually owns the wallet, is actually doing those, agentic tasks, or if there's a human in the loop. That was a huge issue. Last year's kind of agent cycle was like, who's driving here? And then there's also the issue of, is this agent going to actually do these things that it says it's doing? So a lot of the data is like self-reported. A lot of folks are still hosting their own models or agents. So it's hard to tell really like if that's the true performance. And then in the model space, we have really cool projects like Alpha Arena, like N of One, that has been kicking ass like over the past week, and Recall, where we're seeing these agent model and kind of races where we're giving agents capital and having them go trade, and that it's a great way to bring markets um, into intelligence markets. Like we can basically create intelligence markets and consensus around intelligence markets versus like self-reporting, benchmarks, peer reviews. Like these are all human coordinated processes. Whereas like if we want to really showcase how intelligent something is, it should be done with open markets. And so I think there's like some really cool things that we can look forward to there. But yeah, trust is the biggest issue. There's still a human in the loop in so many areas in our space still.
Yeah, no, this is a lot to unpack. So just for the audience, and this is my distillation of what I think Matt was trying to get at, or how I
My
interpreted
translator.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to process this. So what you're saying, kind of what you started with, was like these open source models are getting smaller, right? So just to set context, this analogy is very rough. The pre-training and the models that you use are kind of like the DNA. And now you can compact the DNA a lot tighter now, right? And so the idea is there's your DNA, but then when you're born, you might be whatever animal, let's say, the DNA of a bird, of a tiger, of an elephant. They're very different. That's their pre-training. It's their DNA. The inference comes in as your working memory. And what these bigger models are trying to do is match the DNA and own your working memory. What Gaia does is allows you to own your own working memory, right? And so now what Gaia is saying and what you're saying, Matt, overall is like these models are getting smaller and smaller. And it makes sense why you want Gaia to be on the home screen of some phones, because now you're going to be able to run it on a phone and then be able to be the AWS of inference as it scales. And you have all these standards and payments all figured out. And so this is a big opportunity. What you're saying, unlocking a $2 trillion potential market. So it totally makes sense. And I kind of understand where you're going with this and the vision for Gaia, if I understand that kind of broad strokes.
Appreciate you. Yes, clearly. It's kind of like if you see the way we see it is like we speak to the like speaking to several like knowledge builders and model builders, and we all kind of see this future where like there's going to obviously be more folks running stuff at home and on edge devices, and they're going to slowly pull away from these bigger inference providers or just like AI providers like an OpenAI or Anthropic. I think we'll always lean on them just as much as we lean on like a lot of SaaS products we use on a daily basis. I think we'll have a place for that. Some people might use it more than others for sure, but I think the the big wave will be like you run your own infrastructure at home. It's a lot more lightweight than today, and so you can run a more powerful model like on your own, like Mac Mini, like at your house. But then say your phone needs to tap into your own private network, like you can rig up that networking and have your own kind of personal GPT that works for you. But at some point, your agent is going to need knowledge from some like mentor. Like they're going to need a model that is trained on finance and like can basically like it's like the digital shaman, like gives it a little mushroom, has it go on a on an adventure and teach all about finance. I can see that happening where basically people will pay for that. People will pay to like upskill their model, upskill their at home inference, and that will parlay into their light client, like their mobile kind of edge device. And yeah, we just see the trend going in that direction. I think people will start to realize that that's going to be a more interesting future for folks who are putting their entire lives into these systems. This is much different than all the technology we've had in the past. We are putting everything about ourselves into this very knowledgeable infrastructure, and it's very scary that it could just be taken from us, and it's a way to monetize us as humans more than Web2 did to us with advertisers. So it's that's what we care about.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I'm sold on kind of like how do we protect against this downside overall. We've seen the patterns historically with centralization and what happens there, but what is really interesting, and your viewpoint is really enlightening, Matt, because you really sit really kind of in the middle between like AI and crypto. What do you see now, kind of in your perspective? Because typically it's like crypto people trying to use AI, or AI people trying to understand crypto, but you are sitting right in the middle of the two. Can you talk about maybe what you think is the kind of next intersection, and maybe in the context of prediction markets?
Yeah, and I'm biased, of course. 'Cause I'm very interested in markets, and in markets that are disrupting consensus, like crowd consensus or social consensus. And so I feel like as we see all these agents onboarding to the internet, and they all have various skills, we're seeing um, the most like what's the word? It's easier to measure agents that are doing financial tasks. It's harder if you have like a reply guy agent, or an agent doing social media management. Well, that is reply guy, but like an agent doing marketing tasks, an agent doing like operational tasks. Like it's harder to measure KPIs that can create markets versus like if you look at Polymarket, the big innovation was um, taking taking the advent of media and truth and completely disrupting that with open markets. So now Polymarket is the go-to source for how campaign polling is perhaps skewed, and you need the actual truth based on an open financial market. So I think now that we have agents having more utility, especially financial utility in crypto, agents are more likely to open a Web3 wallet than a bank account. You can now create open markets where people are betting on the KPIs of these financial agents. So imagine agents doing day trading, or agents managing some like LTV or like a loan, or an agent's doing some centralized exchange, DEX arbitrage. You can find clear KPIs that are not just ROI. It could be how well did they manage the risk ratio, and how long did they maintain some peg on a stable coin. And so if you create financial markets around these things in sharper or like quicker resolution times, there's like a really interesting space there where you can bet on agents. And I think on the back end, what that does is it creates trust. It creates track record for agents to say, hey, I didn't just report this track record and or the stability of this agent, but it's also been verified by this market, and here's the on-chain attestation or reputation that's true. And I think what the real cool thing there is, if you looked at Alpha Arena this week, I thought it was exciting. I love that project. I want to meet the team, but you're looking at these kind of digital horses, managing money, and I'm like, dude, you could be fucking trading on this thing all fucking day. Like, every like 30-minute window, like someone could be betting on some percentage like delta or kind of change and or stability. So there's two sides of the market that will think the agent is going to perform in a certain way, and I'm very interested on that piece when it comes to crypto and AI. Like the thing that we can bring to the world is I don't know why the first thing came to mind was like crazy crypto shenanigans, but no, the positive things we can bring to the AI space are trust. We can bring any agent in the world into the Web3 world and start to show programmable trust, which gives it more opportunities to access work and or financial opportunities. And then the second big piece is capital velocity. Like we can help financial markets scale with agents that have more autonomous utility but are trusted. And you can have your agent inside of some walled garden, whether it's within the kind of infrastructure of an AI company that hosts their own APIs and infrastructure, or a financial company that doesn't want to give the agent access to leave the platform. But I think if we have open permissionless agents that are composable on different platforms, you're going to have a way to have on-chain verification of trust, just as much as we have with all these digital assets that you can view on different wallets. So that's what I'm excited for.
Look, Matt, James, I think this discussion was super useful. We dive deep into different angles. I'm excited about the decentralized inference. Obviously, also the the advantage to actually leverage decentralized inference for 402 agents. I think there is definitely adoption and distribution that not just started, but is continuing by 8004 adoption. We see more dApps adopting. I'm excited about the registry. There is a lot of things that we could unpack in a part 2 live stream.
Yeah.
But again, thanks so much for your time, Matt. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the stream, and James for hosting this and asking always the right questions.
No, thank you,
So,
Francesco, for leading this. Yeah, it's been great.
Awesome.
Thank you
so much, everyone. And if you're building a space, always reach out. Our door always open. And to all the builders out there, keep building. A004 is just starting, and 402 is a great follow up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.